Hello, I'm Sean Finnegan, and you are listening to Restitutio, a podcast to get you thinking about biblical and historical Christianity, to inspire you to follow Christ, and to convict you to lead a consecrated life. Joe and Rebekah Martin have labored for 20 years in Africa to bring the gospel and humanitarian aid to some of the poorest people in the world. They minister primarily in Malawi and Mozambique, though the work in Kenya is now gaining traction as well. In this interview, you'll hear how a single tract led to one believing family, which eventually resulted in more than 450 churches 20 years later. In addition, the Martins share several stories of what they've seen God do in the missionary field. They've run missions trips virtually every summer with other pastors and students. I myself went, along with my wife Ruth, back in 2004, and we had a great time. Now that they've reached the age of retirement, they've purchased a house in Malawi so they can spend even more time there each year. Here now is my interview, number 10, 20 Years of Missions in Africa with the Martins. Well, welcome to Restitutio, Dr. Joe and Rebekah Martin. I'm so glad to have you here today and to be talking about the missionary work in Africa.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right, so to get started, I thought maybe I'd ask you how you first got involved in the work in Africa.
Well, I got involved because Anthony Buzzard had gone once, and then he invited my dad, Jim Madison, and my stepmom, Martha, to go with him. So they went the next year. And the next year, they were going back, and my dad said, why don't you go too? We really think you'd enjoy this, and it's a real blessing. We think you could be a blessing to the people. And so that's how we got started.
Do you remember what year that was?
1996.
Wow.
20 years ago.
20 years ago?
Yeah.
Huh.
Right
So how'd
now.
you get roped into this?
Well,
Well, I guess
tag
you were
along, yeah.
married.
I was married
Right.
into the trip to Africa. No. Having been in Bible college and taught in school, and so I wanted to get involved, go into Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth.
Right.
And so I'd been to internationally, just touring several times, but not in a mission field. So we wanted to go on a mission trip.
So were you there in 1996 when Rebekah went the first time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, we went
So you went together. What was it like that first year? I'm sure it was way different than the year I went.
It was very different. I didn't really know what to expect. I had not done preparation, but hadn't been taught to do preparation. I just didn't know. And we landed at the airport. As we were flying in, you could see fires coming up all over the place, and I thought the whole country was on fire. But it was women cooking meals.
Oh.
You know, we were greeted by the lady that we were working with at the time, and we rode in the back of a pickup truck. It was about 6:00 in the evening. It was raining. We had nothing to cover us, and it was cold. It's their winter time. It was in July, I believe. It was just very noisy. The culture shock was just oppressive.
Very primitive situation. We were in the back of an old Nissan pickup truck, and it was probably 10 years old at the time. And so you're going at the airport. They got our luggage with tractors, farm tractors. They went out to the plane with tractors and brought our luggage on
What was going through your mind when you saw this?
I'm like, what am I doing here?
And there was no conveyor belt for the luggage.
No.
There was just like a platform they threw it on.
Wow.
So it was very different.
And what was that trip like? Was it a quick trip, or did you stay for quite a while?
We were several weeks. I think it was 2 weeks, but I can't remember.
It was still a long trip.
It was
And
very long.
What made it longer was just the primitive conditions. We were literally sleeping in their houses and washing up on the back of their house. So we would have to go to the hand-dug well to pull up buckets of water and bring the buckets of water to take a bath.
Wow.
And so it's kind of tough.
There was not a main road. They were working on the main road that's there now. It was dirt. It was not just bouncy, but we were covered in red dirt.
Wow.
Everything, because we're in the back of the truck.
Mm-hmm. And after that first year, you said, I got to do this again, or you said never again, or what was it like on the way back?
We kind of had to get over culture shock to process through and decide if we were going to do it again. And we felt like it was a good thing to do. We felt like we had helped change some lives and evangelized, talked about God. So in 1999, we went back, and we've been back every year since, except 2014 when I was sick.
So how many trips is that?
I have gone, one year I went 4 times. So I have been 23 times.
Wow.
And I've been 18.
Well, you'll get there, John.
Yeah. Well, there was the famine, and so that year we sent a delegation over several times to disperse food, and so that was it. But it seems like on that first journey in '96, we met some people that really seemed honest and open and transparent and seeking biblical truth. And so we wanted to go back. Some of our translators, Maxwell Shintingo and Dao Chiwaya, we met them, and we even met the guy from Mozambique, Fabiano Bongo, who is quote unquote the head of the Mozambique work. And so having met them, we wanted to be a blessing to them as much as we could. So it just started, and now it's 20 years later.
So these days, how long do you typically stay on a trip?
Usually between 4 and 6 weeks.
Okay. And just describe for the listeners, I mean, I went with you guys in 2004, I think. So I have some idea of what a trip is like and what happens, but just describe a little bit what a trip is like and what sorts of activities you participate in.
Well, the main thing we go over is to strengthen the churches and present biblical truth. It's pretty tough. If we go in now, you go in and you're teaching pastors. So we may call the pastors from, for instance, the Balaka region of Malawi, and there may be 20 pastors. So they would come in, and so part of the going is to teach pastors and have them practice their biblical learning and things like that. But also every other year we would go in and we would go around literally to the congregations. So we may go to 12 different churches in 24 days, and we would go in. And back in the old days, we had a service in the morning and a service in the afternoon. And the services are about 2.5 to 3 hours long each.
I remember that part. So that hasn't changed much, huh?
No.
Well,
a lot of singing. That's
Yes.
what I remember.
Part of the reason I think that the services are so long, though, is because they all have to be translated. So they take twice as long as they would if you were just speaking to someone that spoke the language.
Right. And they speak Chichewa in Malawi, and your work is also in Mozambique. What's the language there?
They're doing Chichewa there.
Okay.
The Chewa tribe actually was in Malawi, Mozambique, and Zambia also. I met a few people from Zambia, and they spoke the Chewa. So,
wasn't there some Portuguese in
Mozambique? The Portuguese is the national language of Mozambique, but along the border of Malawi, they speak Chichewa.
Well, in Malawi, English is the official language, but you get out in the villages,
right?
And the native tongue Chichewa comes up. And
well, a lot of people don't even know English.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I remember when I went, I got to preach in Mozambique once, and everything was repeated twice. So there's 3 times. So I say it in English, someone says it in Chichewa, someone else says it in Portuguese, and by the time you get back to you again, you have no idea what you're talking about.
What was I saying?
That was really hard.
Yeah, it was difficult.
Yeah.
We've only come up against that probably 3 times. You have to shorten your message because it takes so long to do.
Yeah. I also remember the year I was there, we did some sort of medical exchange. There was a doctor there. Mm-hmm. And I think you had done that for a while before that. Dr. Chamoyo. Chamoyo. Mm-hmm. Do you still work with him or do any medical activity?
Well, we haven't recently. We still plan to, but he moved his office and he's now working out of his home.
Okay.
And a couple times we stopped by, and the one time he was out of town, the other time he still wasn't back from being out of town. So
we've supported him quite a bit, both financially and, of course, people around the country give us glasses and things like that. And occasionally he has a request for certain medications that Rebekah can either find funding or purchase. But also one year he was really wanting to have a microscope. We bought a microscope and took it over. And kind of an exchange, we have asked him to, if any of our pastors come in and need help, and could he help them, and give them a little priority, and he's done that.
Okay.
So he doesn't charge our pastors for treating them or their families.
Wow.
Which is great.
In America, we call that health insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But over there, it's buy a microscope, and you see these pastors, and everyone shakes hands on it, and that's the way it is.
And wasn't he wanting the microscope to look at the malaria to make
Yes,
sure
specifically.
He doesn't have to send it off to Blantyre. He can look
yeah.
under the microscope and see if that's a bug, so he'll know how to treat
Yeah.
it without having to go into the city.
And what about wells? I remember there was some well digging going on. Is that something I think that's been a lot of what you've been involved with, right?
Well, we did some, but the government actually came in and was digging wells that were real, they were, I don't know if they were dug by machines, but I think so, and they had pipes, and they have a pump that you can pump the water out. Most of the wells that we were involved with, helping with, were hand-dug wells, where a person would actually get down there and dig it until they hit water. It was more...
in the early churches, before they really got into the government, they call it boring. Before we got into that, villages they would have to go down to the river and get the water. And so we started digging wells of about 40 feet deep. Then you would hit water, and you have a rope and a bucket. And so then you would have water for the church and water for the little community surrounding the church. And really, that water is much better than getting water out of the river that could have been polluted by animals or something like that. We were doing a service, and occasionally we still do that, but the government has really tried to go in and dig wells in the major communities, villages, I want to say about at least every 2 or 3 miles.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah.
It is. Because when they got water out of the river, people use the river for bathing. They wash their clothes. They, all kinds of stuff in the river. It is polluted.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have water from a well. Much nicer.
I remember when I was there with Ruth, and we looked out the window in our van, and we were passing over a bridge, and we saw people down by the riverside with all their clothes out on the rocks.
That's a laundromat.
And I guess it makes perfect sense. Like, where else are you going to do your laundry other than at the river? But I had never seen or even thought of that before. And that's their reality. I mean, that's what they're doing. There's not electricity or running water. So you just got to do what you got to do, right?
And a lot of nice flat rocks, if you remember, on the river, and just wash the clothes and lay them out to dry on the grass on the bank. And I was just reading in the book of Acts talking about they went into Europe. Where did Paul and Silas go? They went to the laundromat, which is down by the river, and Lydia, first European convert, was there. So still very primitive, just like the book of Acts maybe. Go down to the river to wash your clothes. Little danger in that too. We heard one story. You want to tell that one about the lady who got eaten
the lady
by...
that we were working with mainly was at the Shira River, and she was going down to the south to Bangula. And she got a little rowboat that she borrowed, and she rowed across, left it there, went and did her business with the church, and then came back. And as there's a hill, and then the river is down lower than the hill. And as she came to the hill, she heard a lot of women wailing and just carrying on. And she went down there and asked what was wrong. And as they were washing their clothes there, a crocodile came and got a young mother.
Oh, wow.
And and so she was afraid, but she went down because she had to get back across the river. The crocodile came up then, and the lady was still in his mouth. And so she said it took a lot of faith to get in that little rowboat and go back across the river.
I didn't even realize. Yeah, I guess I did know they had crocodiles.
Oh, yeah.
there.
Oh, yeah, they're all over the place.
We went on that boat trip that year I was there.
Yeah, I remember the crocs.
And you're right, there were crocodiles there and hippos.
Yeah,
Right, lots of hippos.
Right. Yeah, well, a hippo is no joke either. If it's not in a good mood, right?
They're
That's true.
one of the most deadly animals in Africa.
Huh.
So
Wow.
it's not all business, and I'll just talk about the game preserve.
Yeah.
There is a game preserve, Luanda Game Preserve there, about the lower end of Lake Malawi. And so for a fee, and they do charge Americans kind of high price. I think it was $25 each at least, even back in the day. But then you can hire a boat to take you up and down the river, and you see lots and lots of hippos. The Shire River is one of the dominant places where hippos grow, but also crocodiles and eagles and the novelty thing, if an elephant comes down out of the woods to water and graze, we got to see them many times. That's
We've
a lot of
seen
fun.
big herds of elephants many times.
Wow. So share some stories about some of the things you've seen God do over the years as far as getting this work going, seeing it expand. I know you're in Kenya now too.
Yeah.
And just kind of let people in on what you've seen, over 20 years now.
I think for the two of us, when we went, Jim and Anthony had worked on that and had made the communication and things like that. But in one of the first meetings, either in 96 or 99, one of the guys from Mozambique, and you've met him before, Fabiano Bongo and Taliana Chaco were over in our meetings. They just says, why don't you come over to Mozambique? And no one had ever done, from our group, no one had ever done that. They had some political turmoil. The communists had a little revolution in there. And so for a long time, it was not a place to go, but it had calmed down. And I told Pastor Bango, Lord willing, we'll try to come to Mozambique next year. And so we did, and we've been there almost every time we've gone. We haven't been able to go each time because still there's some turmoil, but as a result of that, there are close to 300 village churches over in Mozambique. So, and it wasn't our doing. We just tried to maintain our relationship with the Mozambique pastor, Fabiano Bongo, Taliana Chaka, Aneva Sande, Lomos, and you've seen some of those guys, and they are the true evangelists. They will go, days on a bicycle to go to another village and teach about the kingdom of God and Mulungu Motsi, the one God, and things like that. So it's just been a blessing to see Mozambique grow, and now we're having similar experiences up in Kenya as well.
Well, the neat thing is, this started out with one family, a husband and wife, when Anthony and my dad went. Well, Anthony went the first time by himself. And now, 20 years later, there's about 150 churches in Malawi and about 300 churches in Mozambique.
Wow. From one?
From one, yeah,
Wow.
One family. So I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah, 450 churches. That's definitely volume. No question about it. And how did that get started? Somebody came across a flyer or a tract or something that Anthony produced?
Yeah. Yes. Well, someone at the bus station brought it in from another country and didn't want it. They handed it to this other guy and said that, I don't want this. Do you want to read it? And the guy did and believed it and contacted Anthony and started from there.
And he just went right over by himself.
Yeah, he did. By himself, no preparation.
That's so Anthony
And the story was, British stiff upper lip. And, he had to walk through tea plantations to get to the house where the people lived. And he did. And so it was kind of an amazing story.
Huh. So one little tract and then one family and then 20 years later, 450 churches in 2 countries. Yeah. 2 of the poorest countries, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very poor.
Especially Mozambique. I mean, I remember when we went, the exchange rate was just, their local currency was just ridiculously inflated. It was they counted in thousands or 10,000.
They have now knocked 1,000 off of that, so you can back up to, I don't know what it is now, but the exchange rate in Malawi, when we first went, was about 7 kwacha to $1, and it's now 795 kwacha to $1.
Times.
Wow.
But
inflation,
in Mozambique, they already had thousands on their currency, which is Metacash, and about, I don't know, in the last 5 years, I can't remember exactly when, they knocked off the last 3 zeros to cut, just because the inflation was so
crazy,
bad.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to buy that banana. That'll be 50,000 Medicash. Okay, here you go. Let me get my wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
And, you have to use their currency when you're in the country. And so the money changers, as you're going from the Mozambique border up to the little hotel where we stayed, they're on the road and they're waving sacks full of money. And so you give them $100 and you get this big 4-inch stack full of money for $100.
Actually, more than that.
It was just ridiculous. And finally, they devalued whatever it is, just took off the zeros and call it whatever.
One of the years we went there, I'll tell you the story later on, but we were not able to get a motel. And my dad was with us, and he had had both of his hips replaced. And so we were going to buy some foam mattresses. So we went to the mattress shop to get them, and we had plenty of kwacha, but they said it was not legal for them to take kwacha. They had to take Medicash. So we went to the bank across the street. We exchanged $65, U.S. American dollars. And it took them 2 hours to get it for us. And there were 7 people that consulted each other back and forth, whispering stuff. When they finally gave it to us, we literally did need
a backpack, wasn't it?
The backpack was full. Joe's briefcase was full. We were holding it in our arms. I mean, every sack we had, it took up. We were just loaded going across the street, and it was just $65.
Wow.
So,
and you got the foam mattress?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Now that money's their problem.
That's right.
Yeah, they have to deal with that.
Wow. That's something. You guys have any other stories? Or you?
Oh, lots of stories. We had a Zach and Zaquise Ross that went with us, and that's Kent Ross's youngest son. And so we had rented a room at the Pensial Lily. I don't know if you remember that, but Pensial Lily, the little hotel right inside of Mozambique, at the Melange and Villa. And so, but we went to the church and had services, and then we came back to the Pensial Lily about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and they said, "We're sorry, we had made a prior reservation, and so we don't have any rooms, and there are no rooms anymore."
Well, the thing is, we had already paid for the room. And what happened is they were afraid, since we were white, that somebody was going to come attack us and mess up their place. And so the lady said that her daughter rented the rooms to somebody else, and they were in there. So they gave us our money back, but we had nowhere to stay.
So then we had to go out to the church to sleep.
Hold on a second. So they invalidated your reservation
Right.
because you're white. Why wouldn't they want white people?
Because white people are a target a lot of times because they're supposed to be wealthy.
Okay. So they didn't want someone to come attack the white people in their motel.
In the motel.
Right, because it would mess, who knows what it would tear up.
Over 20 years or whatever it's been that we've been going there, we know the guys now at Pensial Lily, and we know their names and we know the cook. And they do have now a locked gate where you can park your vehicle inside and it's locked up. A little more security involved.
Now, is this the same place that I stayed at?
I think so.
Where you have to flush the toilet with a bucket of
Yeah,
water
that's
Yes.
right.
off to the side?
This
Yes.
is the elite hotel.
That's
Yes.
Our prisons are better than that.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But the story was we had to go to the church to sleep. We had nowhere else to sleep. And so we went there, and you want to tell?
I want to back up a little bit. Before we went from Malawi to Mozambique, this may have been the first year we went to Mozambique. I can't remember. But Zaquise was terrified to go into Mozambique.
Yeah, she was very afraid.
She did not want to go. And I said, well, you don't have to go. We're not going to make anybody do anything they don't want to do. But then she didn't want to stay in the village by herself. She would have been safe, but she just wasn't comfortable with any situation. So she came with us.
So
Well, Zaquise is the only one that could actually blend in a little bit, too.
I know. I know. That's true.
yeah, being black, she would fit in real well. So
Yeah.
she probably would not have been attacked.
Yeah, she's the least endangered person there.
Except she couldn't speak Chichewa. But
Right.
But the story was we were sleeping. We literally lined up in the front of the church. They usually have a raised platform for the speakers, maybe 6 inches. So we just lined up.
there were 7 of us.
7 of us, and we sleeping bags and whatever we had. and the foam mattress we had bought for Jim, and lined up and sat there. But the people, the church people, got machetes and 2 at each door.
And they camped around the church.
Because of previous robberies and things like that. And remember, Mozambique had just had a kind of revolution 10 years or so earlier, and there was still a lot of political unrest. So they guarded us.
Wow.
They guarded us that night.
What was that like? Did you feel more endangered or more safe having them guarding you?
I felt like we would be warned if somebody came and that we could jump up and run or something. I don't know.
Seemed like a hairy situation.
It was. It was very, very cold, and there was no doors or windows, so we put Bible boxes in the windows to try to block some of the air, some of the wind. But that whole trip, my dad had leg cramps constantly, and he would, he'd start having a cramp, and he'd holler for somebody to rub his leg. So everybody was used to that, and he was up against one side, and it was Joe, me, Zaquise, Zach, and then several more people, and then my dad. They lit a lantern and put it on a bench to keep going the whole night. They could see that we were safe when they looked in.
Wow.
So Zaquise looked over. She was very nervous.
I bet. Yeah. She didn't even want to go to this country, and now she's sleeping with guys with machetes at the door.
Yeah.
And she looked up. She sat up in the middle of the night, looked over towards my dad, and she said there was a man, a black man, sitting on the bench with his feet on my dad's legs. And she thought to herself, well, that's really strange because he's been hollering about his legs the whole time. She was surprised that he could stand that. And so she lay down and went back to sleep, and that happened 3 times. And she said he was sitting there the whole time on the edge of the seat with his feet on my dad's legs, and he was just looking out over us. And so she thought it was Dowd. So the next morning she got up and she said, hey, guys, did you see Dowd sitting over there by Jim? And we had all slept. We were exhausted.
Right.
She started asking the people, and then she asked out. Nobody had seen anybody. They had been looking in the windows like all night long. Nobody saw anybody sitting there, but it was a black guy. So we really feel like it was an angel that God sent, not just for protection, but for her peace of mind.
Right. Huh. Maybe
Very
to keep
strange.
his legs from...
Well, yeah, because they didn't cramp up that night.
Yeah.
Very strange situation.
What was driving you to keep going back? I mean, why do you love these people so much? And you can't blame youthful indiscretion for keep going back year after
Right.
year. I mean, this is very
Right.
intentional. It's very much a part of your life. What motivates you to keep going?
One thing, you talk about culture shock. In the U.S., K.P. Yohanan wrote a book called Rich Christians in an Age of Hunger. It challenged me a little bit, because we're so stinking rich. The poor in our country think we're poor, but when you get to Malawi and Mozambique, they have nothing. I mean, you've been there. No running water, no electricity. You got to dig it and plant it in the field or you don't eat, basically. There's a little bartering going on, a little bit of maize or corn for, tomatoes and back and forth and things like that. And yet, they are so joyful in their worship, and they're so happy. They will sing and dance and they rejoice. They may not have anything but sema, which is the cornmeal, and a little bit of gravy, but they are happy. They're rejoicing. They may not have anything but a thatched roof, but if they get a Bible and you put it in a plastic bag, they will read that Bible and wear it out for the Word of God. So I appreciate someone who is joyful despite their circumstances. And, when you talk about third world or developing countries, we in the United States, until you go, you just don't know. Until you go, you don't know. And so they are not well off financially or materially, and yet they are receptive to the Word of God.
I have to agree. I really, I love their enthusiasm. I love their love for the Word. Sometimes we've gone over there and we're teaching, and we get done, and they want you to keep going. They don't want you to stop. They just want to hear more of the Word. And
like, how long are we talking here?
3 hours or more.
So after 3 hours, they're like, keep going.
Yeah.
Well, and often if there's like 4 visitors there, we may have a team of 4 or 5. We'll have 2 or 3 speakers. Usually we try to bring some pastors who are main speakers, but also we have students who come and let them be additional speakers also. So we may have 2 pastors and a student speak, and they will say, what about those 2? They haven't said anything yet. Give them some time to speak. So it's like everybody has to say something and give greetings and preach a little of the word. So it's interesting.
Do you think the lack of television and books, that this is their entertainment?
Absolutely,
in a sense, and seeing white people too, that's a novelty in a lot of these villages. At least I remember when I was there, they would run out and meet our van and with cheers and
sing along
dancing
to the church. In one of the villages recently, and this has happened 2 or 3 times, we may drive an hour off the road and back and forth, and sometimes 2 or 3 hours, and you get to this village. When the Zungus, the white guys, come in, then it's kind of a novelty. So the chief usually shows up. And 2 or 3 times the chief got up and said, this is the first time a white man has been in our village since time began.
Since time began.
Yes.
I don't know how he knows that, but
he's the chief.
He's the chief.
Well, really, by word of mouth, they pass history on, so they could be right.
Yeah, they could be right.
Who knows?
And what we also do, the chief is usually invited to stand up and give greetings, not only to the congregation but to the visitors, they call them. And so he tells something, and usually in response, we usually give the chief a Bible. And one of the chiefs just went on and on about he had never had a Bible, and now he has a Bible, and he's going to treasure that Bible. And this village now has its own Bible. And so it's
and that particular chief said, this is the best gift I've ever had my entire life. Remember that?
Yeah.
And a Bible probably is around $7 to $10 now over there. And if you think a daily wage over there is hardly anything, it represents it's a major gift and a major value. Plus it's the Word of God.
Yeah. As you reflect back on the work you've done in Africa and all the different people that have gone with you over the years, because it's pretty much a different group each year, right? Mm-hmm. How have you seen the work expand, in particular in Kenya? And what's that looking like these days? Because I know this past year you did spend extra time up there.
Mm-hmm. We started working with one man named James Nyanguti. He knows the word, he spreads the word, he's very evangelistic minded. And I think through him, we met Maurice Chihilu, and they're both on the west part of Kenya. One's in the north and one's in the south along Lake Victoria. So Maurice is more educated. He's very outgoing, very charismatic.
He's a former banker.
Yeah, he is a former banker. He stopped banking to pastor a church.
Okay.
Maurice also, since he was a banker, he had access to internet. He had heard some of your teachings.
From Living Hope?
From Living Hope, and some of our teachings from the internet as well. So he knew about our biblical truths that we emphasize.
So he had already done
before
the internet
we got there.
investigation,
Right.
come to find these truths about who God is, about the kingdom. So when was the first time you went to Kenya? Was that a couple of years ago, or
2007? I think was the first year.
8 or 9 years ago.
Okay,
and
but
so that was just a foray. We didn't know Maurice. We just went to James's area and visited him and visited several of the house churches. There was no building. We went to house churches. And so then once we established that relationship, and then we've gone back, 4 times now? But now it's expanding. The best trip, let me just tell you about this year. We were just there 6 months ago. In the north, around Maturu, where Maurice is, they have a group of churches, about 12 churches he's working with now. And then in the south with James Nyanguti, there's about 10 or 12 people, pastors that they're working with. So we would meet in a gazebo down in Kilgoris, and we went for 3 or 4 days, nothing but Bible, 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 you know. One God, and then, you know, Jesus as the Son of God, and the kingdom of God. And then, so they started getting together. And this year, Kenya is officially recognized. Wasn't it 6 months ago that Maurice went through the process?
It was a year ago in November. It's a long process to have a church recognized by the government.
Oh, okay.
And if you're not recognized by the government, then sometimes you cannot meet as a church. Now, we got a lawyer in Malawi back years ago and registered with the government, so that was good. And in Kenya, they had been trying for about 2 years, and it finally happened last year. There was some ban or something on any new churches being admitted for registration because there were a lot of pastors that were abusing. They were money grubbers, and so they didn't want that to continue. But we were very fortunate to be able to get that.
Wow.
So we met with the men in the south and then met with the men in the north, and we talked about forming a board. One of the great things I think we've done in Malawi, Mozambique, to make it an indigenous work, their work. It's not our work. Over 20 years, they run the show. We don't deal with individual situations. They deal with the individual situations. The boards, Malawi has a 7-member board. They meet, they make decisions, and we're trying now to build 3 church buildings in Malawi and 3 church buildings in Mozambique. We don't determine which ones those are.
Right.
They tell us, the board makes that decision. And so Malawi and Mozambique have been working very well together. There's always little spits and spats and things like that, but they generally have worked very well together, knowing we have limited resources. They'll say, well, this church needs this and this church needs that, and this pastor died, and can we help this family? And so they give us information and we act on that. Well, that has now happened in Kenya this year. They've generated a 6-member board, 3 from Maurice Chahilu's area and 3 from James and Amos's area down south around Kilgoris. And so they are going to, Lord willing, start functioning as a national board now. And so we've had pastors from Nairobi, pastors from Eldoret, pastors from Kisumu, all coming together to try to work together. So we're looking for them to grow. And remember, Kenya is much better off than Malawi or Mozambique. You know, their standard of living, it's not our standard of living, but it's, you know, there are more cars in Kenya, there's more electricity in Kenya, there's more running water in Kenya.
Almost everyone is educated.
And most everyone is educated, and the official language is English, but the secondary language is Swahili. But there are 42 tribes in Kenya, and so you will go into one area and they don't speak Swahili. They'll speak Kikuyu or they'll speak Luo. And remember, President Obama is from the lake area, and that's any name in Western Kenya that starts with O is of the Luo tribe.
Oh, okay.
And then in Nairobi, the Kikuyu tribe is the main tribe, and that's right now the major tribe of rulership. But our group is working together and coming together pretty good.
What do you see in the future of the work in Africa? I know you recently bought a house. So what?
Yeah, in Malawi.
Well, in Malawi. So what are the plans there?
We're planning to, when we retire, which will be soon, hopefully, we're planning to spend quite a bit of time there, probably 3 to 6 months at a time, and just continue with what we've been doing, go around teaching, continue with building relationships and keeping up the ones that we have. And
I got a real strange story. It's almost like
I'm interested.
Charisma story. So anyway, every time we go over, the hotel rates were $5 a night 20 years ago, and then they went up to $10 a night, and then $20, and now I don't know, $70, $80
it's $120 a night.
It's a nice hotel that
You
one of the
stayed
hotels
in.
I think that you stayed at, they've remodeled and air conditioning. Some Indians took it over, and it's air conditioning, and so we can't afford that anymore.
Wow.
So we started looking into buying a house, and so we told Linda, our coordinator there, to just be on the lookout and see what she said. And the story is the thing that clinched the deal. Now this is going to sound weird. This is almost like a Gideon sign, but anyway, I was watching TV one night, and you know how they have these someone is lost, and this picture of a young lady who had been taken somewhere, and it said simply, "Watch out for Destiny, Martin." and so the young lady's name was Destiny Martin.
Uh-huh.
And so...
obviously somebody related to you.
Probably not, but it's in Atlanta. But a young black lady, Destiny Martin. I said, well, that's kind of interesting. I wonder if God has something in store. So I just thought, watch out for Destiny. And then I read, oh, that's a person's name. And then I think it was the next morning, Linda called and was so excited. We found the perfect house for you. You could have students come over. We've got 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. And it's within a mile of ShopRite, Rebekah's favorite shopping place.
Groceries.
And so this is the perfect house. And so we said, we're going to pray about this seriously and get back to you. And then someone sent us a little money, and so we felt it was the Martin destiny to buy that house.
To buy the house?
Something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not supposed to let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, but we invested in the house because I think it's going to be better for Malawi, and this is only 50 miles from the Mozambique border. So we're within an hour of a lot of our Mozambique churches. You still may have to go 45 minutes or an hour to those churches after the border, but we are right there, and so we're in very comfortable situations. It's kind of a nice neighborhood, just 3/4 or a mile away from a major shopping store, and so we can be in Malawi, in Mozambique in an hour. We can be in Balaka in about an hour. We can go over to Cholo down south with those guys in about 45 minutes, and so.
And you're going to be living there.
Yeah.
We
Lord
really
willing.
felt like this house was a blessing from God. We had talked about it. We had prayed about it actually for several years. And in December of last year, we just felt like this is something God wanted us to do. And we didn't have the money for it. So we refinanced our house to be able to do that. And then when the house was found and we paid for it, it happened to be the exact amount we had refinanced our house for. So we felt like that was a blessing. And then just out of the blue, this person sent us a huge check and said they wanted this to be used in missions. And we said, well, we just bought a house. Can we use it to pay some of our loan back? And they said, sure, any way you see fit, just do, because we know that you're doing God's work there. So that was just an affirmation to me that this was God's doing.
Wow.
So you can bring Ruth over and the boys and have plenty of room.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. What if somebody listening to this wants to go and they're interested in coming to visit you or participating in a trip? What kind of qualities are you looking for in somebody that joins the team? And how would they get in contact with you?
Well, we talked about this. First of all, they need to know biblical truth and have a love for it. And they also need to have obviously a love for God, for Jesus, and for people. They need to be healthy. They need to have the kingdom as the focus.
The reason we say healthy is when we go to Africa, we carry 50-pound suitcases. That's the limit. We put tracks in them. Each person can. So we're carrying these giant suitcases, and so if someone, has a
broken back,
which I now have, if someone is not able to at least carry their own weight and a 50-pound suitcase, then there'll be a burden. And then if someone who wants to go, they really need to be flexible. We have a little saying called TIA. This is Africa. When you're there, anything can happen.
Right.
Okay, I don't know if you were on this particular trip, but one day the van that we had rented had a flat tire and the jack wouldn't work. So what are you going to do? Well, we were near a village and we saw a bunch of guys standing over there, about 10 guys, and we invited them to come lift the van up while we put rocks under the axle to change the tire. Well, TIA, this is Africa.
Right. Yeah.
And then one day we're going to a church and we said to Dowd, how far is it? He said, oh, not far. So we drive about an hour and a half, and I says, Dowd, how far is this church? And he says, oh, it's not far. And we drive another hour. So we're 2.5 hours into this trip. And I said, Dowd, how far is the church? It says, it's near. And then it was another 30 minutes.
Oh, man.
So TIA. So don't expect normal schedules. Don't expect normal times,
And expect your plans to change in the middle of what you're doing.
Like we were intending to go to Mozambique this time, but there's something going on. We couldn't get across the border. We would expect people to be flexible, and they also will have to do, and we would expect them to do, like mini sermons. A younger person would have to do a mini sermon of 15 to 20 minutes and do that with a translator. So we ask them to prepare ahead of time biblical lessons on biblical truths ahead of time. So they need to be able to, in some sense, public speak.
And we now, after experience, have learned to have them not only prepare them, but send them for us to look over beforehand, so that if it needs to be polished up or
right. And so you can avoid train wrecks in the moment.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you have this person up there in front of a group, and you have your stamp of approval on them because you brought them, and then they get up there and start preaching some weird thing. Yeah, I can totally see why you want to do that.
We need to know them a little bit. And if you remember your case, you came down to the Bible college for a little bit, and you had desires to go to Africa. So we listened to you for, okay, let's go. But also another thing is we're self-funded. We depend on donations to go. And so
each person funds themselves.
Each person would have to talk to their friends and family and church members to raise up the funding to go there. And it used to cost about $2,000. By the time you buy a plane ticket to Johannesburg and a plane ticket up to Blantyre, and now that price has gone up. So they have to raise their own funds. And so the main thing they would do is just talk to Rebekah. She's kind of the coordinator for Africa, and get on a list. And then the LHI has a form, Lord's Harvest International Mission Sending Agency has a form they need to fill out. And so we approve meetings early in the year and approve tentative dates. And hopefully by January, February, we'll have a list of tentative people that go and check them out.
So what is it up to now?
It's about $5,000 per person.
I think when I went, it was like $3,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, the $5,000 included the Kenya part too, so it was much.
Okay.
It was about
more.
Yeah, it was about $3,000 for the ones that just went to Malawi, and it was a little bit less than that for the ones that just went to Kenya. Josiah went with us on the whole trip, so the three of us had the same price ticket for everything. But
so with the house, it should be a little cheaper because we won't have to pay the $100 a night to get rooms in a hotel. Right. We have a nice place to stay. One thing about who went this year to Malawi, we had Rebekah and I and Josiah, my son Jeremy went, and then Pastor Rufus Myers went. I think this was his third time. Now that's a novel thing. We were stopped with Rufus in the van one day, and the police goes over to him and starts talking, Muli Bwanji, Diluino Kaino. And so Rufus says, whatever. And so they thought he knew the language because he was black. It was kind of funny interaction.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to come, they can get in touch with you guys?
Mm-hmm. They can email me.
All right. So, and we'll have Rebekah's email address in the show notes so you can look that up if you're interested. I so appreciate you two coming in and being willing to share about your experience. I have about 1/20th of an idea of what you're talking about here.
Because you've been there.
Because I've been there, and I just wanted to share on the TIA point. that the image that always came to my mind after all these trips each day was of a paint can in the Home Depot getting mixed, because that's what I felt like in the back of that van, bouncing up and down and up and down. And yeah, it does take some serious resiliency to
make
just the
those trips.
travel.
Yeah.
It just wears on you day in and day out. And then you get there, you sit, and then you get to speak, and then you sit, and it's hard to relate to people without knowing their language, and you learn a few phrases, but it's not an easy trip.
No.
It's not a safari. It's not a vacation. It's work, and it's to the glory of God. So I think it's really inspiring what you guys have done, and I hope that this work continues many, many years from now, don't you?
We do.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah, that's the plan. Each generation turns it over to the next. We kind of went from Anthony and Jim, and now Rebekah and I are looking at doing what we can for the next few years and then turning it over to the next generation. And we're very happy that our son, Jeremy, is really enthused. He's trying to raise funds for educating the young ladies and the young ones in Malawi. Schooling is a major issue because after, fourth grade, they have to pay, and they don't have money to pay. So most are uneducated. And so there's a lot to be done.
The elementary school schooling is paid for by the government for boys, but none for girls.
Oh,
So that's why Jeremy is sponsoring girls.
okay. Anything else you want to say at all?
No.
It's been a blessing to be able to go, and at the college I'm going through the book of Acts, and so go from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria to the ends of the earth, and looking at that in a cultural perspective. Jerusalem, where you are, everyone that you're used to, your family and friends, and where you grew up. But okay, then go to Judea, outside of your normal routine group of friends. In apologetics, you talk about that in evangelism. But then go to Samaria. What does Samaria represent? Oh, those are those quote-unquote half-breeds that the Jews looked down on, that the Jews would not talk to. They wouldn't even go in their home. And Jesus broke that barrier in John 4. He talked to the woman at the well, and broke that barrier. And then the ultimate one was the ends of the earth. Now, so you don't have to go to the ends of the earth to be a missionary. You can start getting to know your next-door neighbor. Invite them in for a meal. So start building relationships right around you. And then in our little town in Morrow, Georgia, we've had Vietnamese move in. And so we have a couple apple trees on front. They come by and they ask, could we pick some apples, please? Sure. So we're trying to get to know them. We're trying to get, and so we do mission work on our own street, but outside of our neighborhood. And then if you have the opportunity, try something for the ends of the world too. Yeah. And we know Matthew 24:14, the gospel of the kingdom will be preached as a testimony to the ends of the earth, and then the end will come. So we feel like this is part of that.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but don't they say that indigenous missionaries are always the most effective?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it's just a matter of changing our own viewpoint as Americans to be like, well, who better to reach Americans than Americans? And who better to reach Malawians than Malawians?
Yeah,
and
that's
so, true. That principle, I think, is very helpful. Well, thanks so much for giving me some time today to
Thank you.
talk.
Thanks, Sean. It's been a blessing.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to this interview. I'll have Dr. Joe Martin back next week to talk about his career teaching at the Atlanta Bible College. But for now, if you want to get in touch with the Martins and you want to contribute either financially or volunteer to go on a trip, you can connect with Rebekah by email at rrebrn@yahoo.com. That's also in the show notes for today. Also in the show notes, I have links to the Lord's Harvest International, which is the missionary wing of the Church of God General Conference that sponsors this trip each year. And also you can keep up to date with what LHI is doing, especially in Africa, but also in other countries, on their Facebook page, if you just search for Lord's Harvest International. For more information about the Atlanta Bible College, where Joe Martin teaches, go to atlantabiblecollege.com. And if it's not too much trouble, please share this episode with your friends. Take a moment and visit iTunes to review this podcast and let others know what you think. And if you'd like to make a comment or engage with this episode, please visit restitutio.org. That's like restitution with no N.org. And remember, the truth has nothing to fear.